Okay, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our session this morning on the Know Your Neighbourhood webinar. It's good to see you all. I'll just do quick introductions from our side. My name is Dami, and I'm the head of programs, and I work for UKCF. On the call is Claire Slade, who's project manager at Forever Consulting, and she's leading on the evaluation side. We've got Ben Robinson, who is Deputy CEO and Director of Strategy over at UKCF, and Nassif, who is Programs Officer, and he's providing support on the Know Your Neighbourhood Fund programme. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to cover this morning, actually, before I go through the overview, we have a number of people on the call, and I know you're all going to have lots of questions. We've got 2 hours scheduled in for this morning. I don't anticipate that we're going to take all 2 hours, but we may do. If we're not able to get through all of your questions, please can you either put them in the chat below, or can you send the question to the contact at your community foundation, and they can field the questions through to us, and then we can respond to you. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be covering this morning, we're going to give you just a brief overview about the fund. Then we're going to move on to the evaluation, who's involved in the evaluation, how you can support the evaluation, what you can do next, the support that's available to you, next steps, and then we're going to open it up to any questions that you have. If at any point during kind of like what I'm going to go through and Claire's presentation, you have any questions, please pop them in the chat, and Steve can ask just to keep an eye on the questions in the chat, and Ben also, if you're able to keep an eye on the questions in the chat. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the programme. So as I hope you're all aware, it's a learning programme where funding has been made available, and there are 4 key objectives. So the first objective is that we're looking to build evidence to identify scalable and sustainable place-based interventions that work in increasing regular volunteering and reducing chronic loneliness. So that's the first aim of the programme. The first objective of the programme. The second objective of the programme is to increase the proportion of people in targeted high deprivation local authorities who volunteer at least once a month. The third objective is to reduce the proportion of chronically lonely people in targeted high deprivation local authorities who lack desired level of social conditions. And the fourth objective is to enable targeted high deprivation local authorities and the local voluntary and community sector in these places to implement sustainable systems and processes that encourage volunteering and tackling loneliness. So at its core, what the programme is looking to address is isolation, chronic loneliness, and looking to increase volunteering. And as part of the programme, as you're aware, it's a learning programme. So we're looking to work with groups who are doing some really interesting work, and we'd also like to learn from those programmes. We'd like to be able to evaluate those programmes, which Claire will talk about a bit later on. With regards to the grant conditions, so the key things to be aware of is that we're looking for meaningful and impactful volunteering, and looking to help people connect with others in their local areas to reduce loneliness. Another priority is increasing volunteer engagement and or engaging those not currently participating in activities. So looking at how we can encourage people who don't currently volunteer to see how we can encourage them to volunteer. And as a part of that is learning to see how that has worked and if it can be scalable in other areas. There's no maximum size and there's no minimum size. That means you can apply for as much or as little as you want. You just need to be able to justify the costs. It's multi-year, but all work must be completed by the 31st of March 2025. I won't go too much into the evaluation side of it. As I said, Claire is going to be discussing those areas. But with regards to eligibility, the fund is open to registered charities, constituted community groups, and other charitable organisations, including social enterprises and CICs limited by guarantee in England, national organisations with local branches, and new organisations that can demonstrate that they are financially robust. We're also open to receiving applications from partners. So if, for example, you're doing some really interesting work in your area and you feel actually you've partnered with a group or you'd like to partner with a group, we're very happy to receive applications from those, provided you can show clearly what both partners are doing, provided that you can justify the budget, and it's a really kind of like interesting project that fits with the aims and objectives of the programme. I'm going to pause there. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Yep. Wonderful.
I'm just going to add very quickly, Dami.
Okay.
Just you probably all scribbling away quickly in terms of the kind of those conditions. All of this detailed guidance and much more will be available through your local community foundation from next week. We'll talk a bit about the kind of timeline. So I would suggest, I think you've all probably been in touch already with your local community foundation. There's 9 that are participating in this program across the UK. So go with those questions. You'll get the kind of detailed guidance. The purpose of today is just to give you a bit of a kind of a high level of what we, and particularly Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who are funding all of this, want to achieve with the program. It's kind of the overall intention. So yeah, ask us detailed guidance, but the best place to go to from next week when the fund opens is your local community foundation.
Okay, hand over to you, Claire.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see so many people on the screen from all around the country, which probably wouldn't have been possible a few years ago, so it's quite exciting. My name's Claire Slade. I work for Forever Consulting. We are a social and economic research organisation. We work all over the country, but we're a social enterprise and we are part of the Forever Manchester Community Foundation. So we, as Forever Manchester, are a member organisation of UKCF. So when UKCF won this fund from Department for Culture, Media and Sport, they brought us in to support with the evaluation. So what I'm going to talk you through over the next several minutes, I'll be honest, is about the evaluation, the importance of it, how we think it will be done, and what you can do at this stage to kind of evidence and illustrate, and when you're writing your application form, how you can put across in the best possible way how you're going to show learning for the project that will then feed into what Department for Culture, Media and Sport want to know. So like Ben says, there will be application guidance that will be going out to you from your community foundation with all of this in. But I do have some slides actually, which I'm hoping someone from UKCF will be able to share. I'm just conscious there's quite a lot of information and some people like to hear it, some people like to read it. So if we have both, hopefully that will tick a few boxes. So we'll get these sent out to you. That means just run through what we're going to do today. So as she has already mentioned, a really key part of the Know Your Neighbourhood Fund is about learning. So from DCMS's perspective, this is a £19 million programme overall, and in kind of government terms, that's decent, but it's kind of not exceptional. But what is really different about the Know Your Neighbourhood Fund is the amount of that 19 million that they've allocated for evaluation, and it's something that's never been done before in government, and they had to fight quite hard for it. And so there are a lot of eyes on the evaluation for this. And so I just mentioned that right at the front, so you know why we're spending a lot of time in this webinar talking about evaluation as well. So as the slide says, learning and increasing what we already know about loneliness and volunteering is really a fundamental aspect of the programme. And so we're going to be looking for opportunities to evaluate the successful projects in quite a lot of greater depth than they're normally evaluated. And just to kind of reiterate again, the programme aims, we want to increase what we know about which projects work, why they work and who they are working for, particularly in relation to increasing participation in regular volunteering, reducing chronic loneliness, increasing pride in the local area, and improving well-being and skills and confidence. So your project might not meet all 4 of those things, but as a programme as a whole, that's what we're looking to understand in greater detail. So in addition to those 4 thematic things, DCMS are also really keen to understand about project sustainability and if or how it can continue after their funding ends. And also whether your project that works well in one area, whether it will work just as well in another area, or a project that works well with a certain type of people, if it will work well with another type of people. Often this is called scalability. So yeah, kind of the sustainability and the scalability element of projects are really important as well. So I just want to start by setting the scene for you about who's going to be involved in the evaluation, and then I'm going to go on to how projects might be evaluated. So first of all, I want to say to all the prospective applicants in the room, please don't worry too much about this. You're going to be really well supported by a team of evaluation specialists. So please don't let this overwhelm you or worry you in any way. So the first group of people that will be there to support you are the local evaluators, and these are going to be appointed by your community foundation. They're not in place yet, and they're going to be selected once the projects have been selected. But the sorts of things they'll do with you is work with you to see how your project will be designed and how it can be evaluated. They're going to carry out a lot of the evaluation tasks. They're going to do all that heavy lifting so you don't have to. And then all the learning they're gathering, they're going to be passing it on to a central evaluator. And that is us. So the central evaluator of this is Forever Consulting. So we will be providing a lot of support to the 9 local evaluators, helping them make sure that projects are evaluated in quite a similar way. And then when they send us the learning that they've done in their local area, we'll be combining that all across all 9 areas to see what's being learned at this programme level. Now, something that you may not be aware, which is fine, but this Know Your Neighbourhood fund, what we're doing through the UKCF and the community foundations is actually just one element of it. There's another strand to Know Your Neighbourhood, which is going through the Arts Council, which we don't need to worry about. But it's still obviously important to DCMS. They still want it evaluated in a very rigorous way. So there's another evaluator who sits on top of us and is evaluating the entirety of the Know Your Neighbourhood programme. So the bits of evaluation that we're amalgamating, we then pass up the chain, if you like, to the national evaluator who is pulling everything together. So it's a little bit confusing. There's lots of different people involved, but I think it's really helpful for you to understand who all these different people are. And a very practical reason why it's important for you to know this is all the kind of monitoring and evaluation information about your project will be shared with all these different organisations, as well as DCMS and UKCF. Sorry, I should have explained. So the National Evaluator is an organisation called RSM, and they're working in partnership with another organisation called NatSen. So yeah, lots of partners involved. And so there'll be a data sharing agreement that we'll be asking projects to sign. And it just will be really important that information is shared when asked to the relevant partners. So going back then to how projects will be evaluated in kind of greater detail or greater depth than usual. So the government, DCMS and the other government departments, they are always really keen to understand whether the things they're funding are having are directly causing the changes that they want to make. So, for example, we know with loneliness, there are infinite ways that loneliness can be reduced. And a person who feels lonely, they may be doing different things to alleviate their loneliness, including taking part in your project, but they might be doing loads of other things as well. So what we're really trying to hone in or is the difference that your project is making to how they're feeling about themselves, or why they're getting involved in volunteering. And so this approach, it's called an experimental evaluation, because we're doing an experiment basically. And to do this, projects need to be designed in quite specific ways, and I'm going to go into much more detail in the next slide about that. So just thinking, if we hold it over here, like the experimental approach is kind of like the gold standard that we want to aim for, if you like. We know, and the government knows, that absolutely not all projects are going to be suitable to be evaluated in this way, and that's fine. But if they can't, we'll be looking to see if there are other methods that we can use to evaluate them in an in-depth way. And I'm not going to talk about that now, but there will be some examples in the application guidance if you're interested to read them. And the other thing that I want to reassure you on is that projects that can't be evaluated using any of these in-depth approaches, they may still be funded, as long as you can still demonstrate that you're adding to what is already known about what works around reducing loneliness and increasing volunteering. And the other thing that's really important to note at this stage is all of the projects that we're funding, regardless of how they're going to be evaluated, they will still be required to provide some basic monitoring information, and your local evaluator will be asking you to support some tasks. And I'm going to go through again what these tasks are in a few slides' time. So yeah, there'll be a range of some projects that don't have to do much for the evaluation, through to some that it's more intense for them. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit in detail now about this experimental evaluation approach that the government are really keen on. So as I say, the whole point of it is to discover whether what you're doing can be described as directly responsible for the changes that we're seeing in participants. And often it's used in medicine. So many of you might have heard of something called randomized control trials, or RCTs. And basically this is where some people take part in a project and they're given they're taking part in an active way. So they're given a drug, for example, that might make them better. But there are other people that aren't given that drug, or they're given a placebo, so they don't know if they're taking the drug or not. So they're given something, it might just not have any active ingredients in. And so there's these two different groups, ones that are getting the project, taking part, and ones that don't know if they're taking part or not. And it's the random element of these randomized control trials comes because participants don't know which group they're in. They don't know if they're getting the drug, or they don't know if they're getting the placebo, and they've got no say and no control about this. So as you can imagine, this probably feels quite uncomfortable for you and the projects you're thinking of, and quite unlikely. So we don't want to rule it out at this stage, but we're realistic in thinking chances are randomly assigning people onto a project or not is not going to be feasible. It's not very ethical. So where it's not possible to randomly assign participants, we can still do an experimental approach as long as there is another group that the group taking part in the project can be compared with. And so we're calling these like the control group or the comparison group. So some practical examples that may work for your projects is if there are people that want to join your project but can't yet, so you're creating a waiting list for them. Or if there are people that your organisation is working with that are quite similar, but they're not taking the part in the project themselves. And so what we would then be able to do is work with the people taking part in the project, and at the same time work with people that are either on the waiting list to join the project, or that are just being supported by you, but not on the project. And we've been working with both groups to see, asking them some very similar, probably the same questions, to see if any differences between the groups can then be attributed to your project. And so, as you can imagine, because these control groups, because the people that aren't taking part in the project, they still need to be involved in the evaluation. You're probably thinking, like, why would they bother? They're not getting anything out of it themselves. And so we need to be thinking about, how can you persuade them to take part? Do you need to incentivize these people in order to take part in the evaluation, even though they're not taking part in the project, or they're on a waiting list to take part on the project in a few months' time? So having two different groups, the control group and the group taking part, is absolutely fundamental to the experimental approach. Other things that are really important, which you can consider, are larger numbers of participants, people taking part in your project over like quite frequently, and also people taking part over quite an extended period of time. So, for example, longer than 6 months. So what we're saying here is that no one's going to tell you how to design your project or how you should deliver it. You absolutely just be true to yourself, but just bear these things in mind. So if you're thinking, oh yeah, I think we can handle 50 participants on our project and we've got enough staff to deliver them, think, oh, could we stretch to 60? Or we're asking people to take part once a month. Could they take part every 2 weeks? Like, what are the changes that you could make to your project that would make it more likely to be evaluated using an experimental approach? So that, in a nutshell, is what an experimental approach is, and kind of like the ideal that we're looking for, if possible. So what you can do then to support the evaluation, just as I say, the local evaluator will be responsible for carrying out a lot of this. I mentioned before, there are some tasks that everybody will need to get involved in, regardless of how your project is being evaluated. And I'll run through these on the next slide. And the other thing just to flag is when you are resourcing when you're completing your application form and you're resourcing it, just make sure that you're factoring enough time and enough resource so you can do the evaluation as well. It's not just about delivery. Okay, so the tasks that you may need to get involved in, apologies for how small this might be on your screen, it's in the guidance. What's worth thinking about is how much time you think it will take you and your team to do each of these tasks. We're often asked, oh, should we just put an X% of our total project value for the evaluation? And I can understand why people would think that, but I always say to people, your time is the same. Like, we all have 24 hours in the day. And whether your project is huge or whether it's smaller, you're going to have to provide the same financial information to UKCF. So it should take people the same amount of time. And doing all these tasks, really, it's not about the amount of money that you've received, it's about the time it takes you to do these tasks. And it takes human beings roughly about the same amount of time to do it all. So it's actually probably not worth thinking about it, time per task rather than a percentage of your overall fund. So everyone's going to have to provide some financial monitoring information to UKCF on a monthly basis. Everyone is going to have to provide some information via the local evaluator. This will all be like online forms, and that will be on a quarterly basis. And so, yeah, it's more than likely to involve just completing a form, the same form every quarter, or very similar form every quarter. Every 6 months, the form that you need to complete will have some more information on, and there's some detail here. There's different indicators we're looking for. Some are about just simple things like the number of activities, the number of participants you've been working with, how often you've been working with them, how long they've been involved, the sorts of things that you'll know yourselves. You won't really need to speak to your participants about. But there will be another set of measures, this outcome measurement data set, and that will be where you have to engage with participants to find out like how they're feeling about loneliness and well-being, their skills, confidence, pride in place. So some of this might be a form, like a survey for them, and some of this might be focus groups or interviews. And again, these will be carried out by the local evaluator, but you'll need to help. You'll need to sort of give the local evaluator access and participant details and maybe space in your organisation for them to run their interviews or run their focus groups. We'd also probably appreciate you taking part in a learning workshop about once a year with all the other projects that are being funded in your area. Again, you need to do anything apart from turn up and take part. They're going to be designed and run by your local evaluator, but think about the time that it will take you to get involved in them. There'll be some people that want to interview you, probably about once during the whole lifetime of your project, just to find out how you're delivering it, how you think it's getting on, what challenges you're facing, and so on. As I mentioned before, the local evaluator will want your support in talking to your participants. So just maybe providing some brews and some nice space for them, a nice environment, yeah, linking them up with participants' contact details. And then the final thing won't be applicable to all projects, but DCMS are really keen to do some case studies and some ministerial visits. And so if that's something that excites you and you think you'd love to have a minister down to show off all the fab stuff that you're doing, then just flagging that as an opportunity and then providing that time for that to happen. So these are some of the very practical things that you'll need to do on, some of them are on a quite frequent basis, some of them are on a less frequent basis, some of them are a bit more ad hoc. So what we're recommending that you do now, I'm hoping that you'll have a bit of a clearer idea now on why the evaluation is so important, why we're spending quite a bit of time in this webinar talking about evaluation. Hopefully it's a bit clearer on the ideal way we'd like to evaluate projects through this kind of experimental approach, and some of the evaluation things that you'll need to do. So what I'd recommend now is if you sort of mull it over, talk to your teams and think about, right, how are we going to demonstrate what we're learning from our project, particularly about, what is working, why do we think that is working, and who's it working better for or most for, and equally, who's it not worked for, just as important. So again, just have some chats about whether there are tweaks that you can make to the design of your project that would make it more suitable for an experimental evaluation. And just to reiterate, absolutely no one is going to tell you how to deliver your project. You are the experts, you know how to do it best. It's just small changes that you might be able to make. Just please think them through and bear them in mind. Probably quite obviously, but I think it's worth saying, is the application form. It might be a bit longer than some application forms that you're used to, but please answer all the questions really thoroughly, but also really clearly. Some of them are in there because they help us understand how your project can be evaluated. So for example, there are questions in there about waiting lists, about the numbers of participants, about how long you're going to be working with them. So the reason why they're there, they might feel odd, but there is a good reason. And just a final reminder, just again to make sure you factor enough time and resource into your plan, so you're being fair and you're being true to yourselves. Dami's mentioned already that there is a lot of support there for you. So when the fund opens, you'll get the guidance from your community foundation that is going to accompany the application form. on many of the questions on the application form, there's some help text. So it kind of explains in a little bit more detail what we're looking for, or the amount of detail that you need to go into. And then I would just really urge you to, any questions that you've got, anything that you're not sure about, please get in touch with your community foundation really early doors, and just ask them. Chances are they will absolutely know the answer, but on the off chance they don't, and they need to check something with UKCF or with us, there just might be a little bit of a time lag. So I just would really urge you, like, ask your questions like early doors, don't leave them all to the last minute. Okay, I'm going to now hand you back to Dami, who is going to talk through the next steps, and I'm going to end the slideshow, I think.
Thank you very much, Claire. I can see there's some questions in the chat around evaluation. Just before we get to the questions, I just wanted to speak to you briefly about next steps. So as you would have heard, there are lots of stakeholders involved in the programme. So we're in the process now of updating all of the guidance and the application form. So the application form was sent to community foundations this week and to our partners, and there's some revisions that we need to make. So just to give you a heads up, it's quite a lengthy application form, but all of the information that has been asked of you is information that we need to be able to kind of to support you, should you be successful with the program. There'll be guidance around the questions, but if there's anything that you don't understand or anything that doesn't make sense in the application form, please speak to your community foundation, and if they can't answer it, they'll flag it to either Claire or myself. The updated guidance will be sent before the end of the week. The application window will be opening next week, so we'll hopefully be sending the community foundations the updated link for the application windows, and they'll make that available to you next week. The application window will close by the 30th of May, and what we'll do is that, because there's still some processes that we're refining and that we're updating, so the key thing for us is having the application window open and you receiving all of the guidance. So those are the key priorities that we're working on, and as we update the processes, so for example, the local panels and the support you're going to be receiving via UKCF and Forever Consulting and RSM in evaluating, all of that will become clearer over the next kind of week or so. So please don't worry about that for now. But for now, next week, you'll receive the application window will open and it will close on the 30th of May. So those are the key dates that you need to have. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to open it up to you. So if I could just ask you to please use the hands up icon on your Zoom, and we'll start taking questions. And if there are any questions that we can't answer this morning, we'll make a note of it and we'll come back to you. If we start with some of the questions in the chat, so when are we looking for projects to start? I think that's going to depend on when everything is approved. So we're looking to identify successful routes kind of like towards the end of June, early July. So around from when you're told that your application is successful. So from then on is when we'll be looking for projects to start. There's a question, what do you mean by volunteers? Is this the same as participants? I think the distinction between volunteers, so participants, to my understanding, and Claire and Ben, please jump in if I've misunderstood. So a participant is someone who is taking part of the program, and a volunteer is someone who's helping to run the program or helping to run whatever the activity is. So if, for example, your activity is that you're going to help people who are not mobile get to a social club, for example, a volunteer would be someone who drives the bus, and a participant would be someone who is driven to the activity. That's my understanding. It's a very crude analogy.
It depends on the nature of the program, really. So if you're targeting increasing volunteers, so there's all the definitions in terms of what we mean and what counts as regular volunteering in terms of once a month, and the intensity of that is all in the guidance. But if that is the intention of the program, then they would, as part of what you're measuring, it's a slightly different thing if it's around chronic loneliness. And as we said, not all programs have to cover all of those objectives, but we do have to ensure one of our roles is there's a good balance across all of the program areas, that we're focusing on all of those themes. So if you all wanted to just focus on chronic loneliness, that would be a challenge for us. So we have to balance some of that, and we'll take that into account when making the decisions. But in terms of that definition, yeah, it depends on the type of activity you're planning to do.
Thanks, Ben. There's a question for you, Claire. In terms of the evaluation approach, I'm concerned about the control group we want to seek funding to support, or folks who want to volunteer with us. If we had a waiting list or were aware of people who were seriously isolated, this would present a significant safeguarding concern for us. Are you able to advise?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that worries me as well about this experimental approach. Obviously, the most important thing is that projects are ethical, and individuals are supported and not put at risk or at any sort of harm. So we wouldn't want anyone to be designing their project that would create a safeguarding concern. And I think that's absolutely fine if you want to explain that in your application form. There's a question that says, like, are you going to run a waiting list? You can say no, and it's inappropriate because of safeguarding for us. What I would say is that if you feel like it isn't going to provide, if it isn't going to cause like safeguarding issues or vulnerable issues, if there are other things that you can do to keep people warm, like say for example you do think you can run a waiting list, but there's got to be a reason why people stay on the waiting list. Why they don't just go off elsewhere and either become a volunteer or alleviate their loneliness elsewhere. There might be other things that you can do to keep them warm for when their time comes to join your project, and that might be things that you feel can help their well-being or minimize any safeguarding risks. So it's just without knowing the specifics of your project, it's really hard to say, but I just would say we're not asking anyone to create any safeguarding issues. If you think it's inappropriate, then don't do it.
Thank you, Claire. Another question for you. Are we also able to provide training to our local evaluators before working with our participants?
It's a really interesting question. I guess I don't know who asked it. Could whoever asked it explain what training they're thinking?
Yes, that was me again, who also asked about the safeguarding risk. So we work with LGBTQ plus young people, and a lot of the times they don't like to work with external organisations because don't understand their identities, don't use the correct language, don't understand their experiences and how that impacts, and having that kind of wider knowledge about where they're coming from with an answer that they might give, that actually it's a much wider reasoning behind it, and kind of all of the kind of intersections of their identity as well. Majority of the people we work with are neurodiverse as well, so just being able to train our evaluators so someone's not kind of going in.
Totally, yeah, absolutely. And I would make that really clear on your application form. That's something that's really, really important. What I would say, like as an evaluator on other different programs, if we were working with a project like that ourselves, we would maybe even, if your staff were comfortable, if they would prefer to lead the session, we could just sort of chat to them beforehand and saying, oh, can you cover this X, Y, and Z? And then you do it in the best way that you think will work with your participants. So yeah, I think when you're engaging people, it's all about like engaging them on their terms, going to them, talking to them how they want to be spoken to, how they want to be dealt with. Otherwise you're not going to get anything out of them. So I would say, yeah, that's really, really important and possible.
Great, thank you.
Right, thanks, Claire. We also have a question around definition of lonely. When is a participant lonely and when not lonely, and therefore not considered by the project?
This is a very good question. I'm going to refer to some information that DCMS have put together for the project. So let me just read it to you. So DCMS's Tackling Loneliness team, they are defining loneliness as a subjective, unwelcome feeling of lack or loss of companionship, which happens when there's a mismatch between the quantity and the quality of the social relationships that we have and those that we want. It's normal to feel lonely sometimes, but it is a problem when someone feels lonely always or often. And so they say when someone feels lonely always or often, they call this chronic loneliness. And chronic loneliness is something that the project is really interested in. What there is no agreement out at the moment is obviously always and often are very subjective measures, and there is no agreement about what that actually means. So when someone actually becomes chronically lonely. So does that sort of help, whoever asked that question? I'm not sure who asked.
Yeah, it was me asking that. I work in part of our project is a cafe, and I could say that everyone is lonely for some reason or not coming into the cafe. It might be that they just don't feel as though they're meeting enough people. It's a very subjective term. So when you're asking how many volunteers have we got, we've got 190 volunteers. I could say they're all lonely, but I could say only 20 of them are lonely. How are we going to say we're getting more lonely people in? I'm just a bit, or can I just say that all our volunteers are part of the project? And then you're talking about control groups, or so I'm not quite sure how one would define them. So it's just a bit unclear to me still. Despite that, but yes, I'm probably even unclearer now you're given that definition.
Okay, so again, I think it depends on your project, because without knowing the nuances of your project, I'm unclear if the volunteers are the people that we're interested in, or if it's the lonely people that this project would be interested in. So I don't know. Well, who is lonely? This, because people have said, oh, it's about like social isolation. So social isolation, people might be social isolated but not lonely, and people might be lonely but have many connections. So it is about that kind of self-definition of are you lonely or not, based on the definition that I've just read out. So it's that unwelcome feeling, it's that I feel something and it's uncomfortable, I don't like feeling like this, I want it to be different. So if you know how many people are feeling like that, we want to work with people that are feeling like that. If you're focusing on a loneliness project, you might not be, and that's something that we'd be looking to tackle and reduce.
Thank you, Claire. We're having a question from Brett. He's asked, if an organisation has a low annual income, does this limit the amount they might be awarded? This would be a question for your community foundation. And so from our perspective, that we don't really have a view on that. It very much depends on your community foundation and how they operate, their appetite for risk, and your ability to be able to show that you're able to deliver the program at whatever the value is. So I would ask you to please speak to your community foundation about that. Someone has asked, and I don't think, apologies if I've asked this already, but so we're not trying to get participants but more volunteers. Ben, are you able to speak on that, please?
It depends on the project. If the question, sorry, just say the question again, Danny.
So we're not trying to get participants but more volunteers.
Yeah, it depends on the project. You can be aiming to, as we said before, you can be focusing on increasing volunteering, you can be focusing on tackling chronic loneliness, or you can be doing both. So you could be trying to tackle chronic loneliness through increasing volunteering. So somebody could be participating in the project as well as seeking to kind of tackle their loneliness. So you can do both at the same time. So without knowing, again, the details of the project or what your approach is, what we want it to be, as I said before, is focused on the challenge in your local area, the approach you want to take. Don't try and squeeze it into exactly, there's a broad objectives and we want you to be designing and doing the things that you want to be doing that are appropriate. Claire's outlined the kind of evaluation, so there is flexibility within the evaluation in terms of what is prioritized in different areas. You don't have to hit all of those outcomes in every single project. So speak to your community foundation, make sure it does fit within that broad framework, but don't try and hit everything just for the sake of it because you think you're more likely to get the money because of it.
Thank you, Ben. We have a question here around partnerships. So we understand that partnership bids are encouraged for the next stage, and we welcome this opportunity to come together with other agencies. Please, can you explain what is the driver behind this and the type of partnerships that you're looking for? So the driver behind this essentially is that groups approach their community foundations asking if they could enter as a partnership, and that's absolutely fine. So there isn't a specific thing that we're looking for. There isn't a specific partnership that we're looking for. It very much depends on the groups applying. So if you're doing a project that you're delivering, if you're currently running a project that you're delivering with another partner, or you're thinking about delivering it with a partner and you want to enter a joint bid, that's absolutely fine. The only thing we would say is that please speak to your community foundation and they'll be able to offer you more support. And if you have any specific questions that they can't answer, they can filter those questions up to myself and Claire.
I'll just add to that quickly, Dami. I mean, one of the other objectives and reason why we're so excited about this program really is that DCMS are not seeking to just do what would be traditionally a kind of a simple program where you deliver something and then you're kind of, it's transactional and you're just fixing someone. They appreciate that the causes for all of these challenges are complex, multifaceted, they're different in different areas. So no one single intervention is going to fix all of these problems. And they're really interested, and we are, about what is the kind of going to be the sustainable solution to it. So appreciate, yes, it's multi-year, but it's still a relatively short period in time. So what we do want to understand is what is driving chronic loneliness or people not to volunteer, and what are going to be, we're not seeking the kind of just the outcome from this is kind of Claire's, hence the kind of the complicated evaluation, is to really understand, ask better questions, to really kind of test what our assumptions are about what's causing it and how we can solve it. Because of that, it's likely that it's going to take more than one organization potentially in some areas to tackle that. It's going to take what you call a systems wide, or at least kind of looking at it in a totality of a place. So do think about, it's not just the activity itself, but what are the broader causes for it, and who you could be working with locally to help tackle or understand those causes.
Thank you, Ben. We have a follow-up question from Brett, who says, so do we want the lonely people to be volunteers? I think, again, it depends on the project. It depends on the project. A question from Beverly, are organizations able to submit more than one application to a single community foundation? I don't think, go on, Ben.
That'd be a question for the community foundation, speak to them.
Yeah, please speak to the community foundation. Another question from Brett, can the volunteering be done from home where loneliness is reduced through connections with others, comes from online communication with others, or are you looking for activities to place in person?
Claire, you might have a view in terms of the definitional things that you've been through, but I think that should be fine depending on. Yeah.
It's up to you. Yeah, if your project is run online and that's how if you're increasing volunteering or you're tackling loneliness through an online approach, then yeah, that's valid, as valid as an in-person approach. DCMS aren't only looking for in-person approaches, they're just looking at what works.
Thank you, Claire. A question from Claire, do you recommend we look at new work, or are we able to apply for existing activities?
Do you want me to say that, Claire?
I was going to, I'm conscious I've spoken.
I think, again, speak to Community Foundation, but there is no reason, it doesn't have to be novel. You can be doing something as long as you can make the case for your increasing our knowledge and understanding of what's the challenges and what's going to be solved. So it doesn't have to be new, but we do have to link it to what those causes.
Yeah, that's it. Like what new thing are we going to learn from your project being funded through the Know Your Neighbourhood fund. So for example, if you've been running something that's worked absolutely brilliantly for ages, what could you do it in a different area, and then we could learn if it works in a different area, or could you do it with a different type of person, or could you do it with more people? Like what is the Know Your Neighbourhood funding going to do to your project that we're going to learn something new from?
And to add to that as well, I mean, this is a chance to kind of, you might previously have been running it knowing that it's tackling loneliness or something, but that's not what you're getting the funding for at the moment. So you might be running some sort of other activity, but it's having all these additional benefits that we're interested in. So this is your chance to make the case for that, and about how your approach does actually contribute to these and increase activity and tackle it. So yeah, no, this is the chance to kind of make that case, but also to ask yourself and the group about whether you, as Claire said, whether there's groups or communities you're not currently reaching, or you could do it in a different way and test that. So you don't have to go into it and know beforehand exactly this is going to be the outcome. The point of this really is to kind of push your understanding and our understanding about how you can support these groups, or who you're maybe missing at the moment, and try a different approach. So we don't want to get to the end of this and just, as I mean, I used to be a grant applicant. I know the kind of, you often feel like the outcome always has to be positive at the end of it. You have had X amount of impact, and you've increased volunteering, and it's always fantastic at the end. The key thing that we really want to do is to increase our understanding of what works and what doesn't work, or trying different approaches, making that kind of case. So this really, I cannot emphasize enough how much the aim for this is about learning. It's not just about making an impact. I mean, it's great, we want to kind of improve the experience for people and kind of tackle those issues, but it really is to be almost asking better questions in 18 months time or 2 years time to kind of improve. And so if there was to happen again, you can kind of try that. You also, there's a chance, and speak to your community foundation about this, but to go into it and kind of asking questions. The point, I mean, some of you will have been involved in phase 1, which ran from sort of January, February, March time, where the point of that really was it's a kind of a short development phase to kind of test these questions, explore these approaches, work out how we're going to, but we want to be doing that through the whole program of actually building our knowledge and understanding, you can try different things over time, as long as we are kind of exploring these kind of key questions, what the challenges are. That's quite a long answer to the question, but
thanks, Ben. Next question, can we apply for any project that we already know it works, such as a face-to-face befriending scheme with older people that we used to run under social prescribing? I think that'd be a conversation you'd need to have with your community foundation. Next question, does the project have to major on volunteers who are lonely, or can other factors be considered, such as unemployment, socially inactive type people, etc.?
Absolutely. Yeah, completely. We want to look at all of the drivers for it. It's not just volunteering, certainly not.
Thank you. Can a national organisation with local branches submit a number of bids across the country?
I'd speak to your community foundation about that. Yeah. Yes, from memory, but you might know better than I do.
I think speak to your community foundation.
I would say my understanding of it, just to throw my tuppence worth in, is that the local foundations are going to be making their decisions locally. So if you submit 9 applications to the 9 different areas, perhaps 2 might fund it and 7 won't. There isn't particularly a mechanism, although I guess we could look at this, of an organisation saying we're going to put 9 bids in, but it's all or nothing. We want funding in all 9 areas, or we're pulling out. That isn't a question we've been asked before. It's not. There isn't a mechanism in that at the moment.
Yeah, we've done that with previous program. We won't be accepting one joint bid. You will be doing local applications. So definitely to speak to your local community foundation about that.
Another question, can we spend some of the money on technical infrastructure, for example, online services? Does the funding cover capital costs? Ben?
Yeah, you know the guidance. Yes, I
Yes.
think, but again, have a look at the detailed guidance.
Yeah.
Comes out around that, but yeah, from memory, yeah, that's absolutely
That
fine.
should be okay. I think that's all. I think I've covered all of the questions in the chat. Please do say if I've missed any. Alternatively, yeah, please do put your hand up if you have any other questions that haven't already been answered or covered, or if you have any questions or comments.
We had an earlier question about low annual income and if that might limit the amount an organisation might be awarded or eligible to apply for.
I think we answered that.
Just to do it again, I mean, that would come down to your local community foundation.
Yeah.
Making that.
Okay.
So just have that chat with them.
Thanks, Steve. Does anyone have any other questions? Let me just move across because multiple screens. There's another question in the chat. So if we aim to increase the number of people that volunteer regularly, but they are not lonely, is that still acceptable? Yes. We have funding from Lottery Know Your Neighbourhood and are looking for match funding.
This wouldn't be match funding for it. It comes from the same source.
Yeah. I think if you have any other questions, please do flag them via your community foundation and they'll pass them through to us and we'll reply to you. So we don't want to take any more of your time if there aren't any other questions. So yeah, just to reiterate, this isn't going to be the last time for questions. If you have any questions, please flag them to your community foundations and we'll do our best to answer your questions. A lot of this information is going to be in the programme guidance, which we're going to be sending to your community foundation. So you'll see all of the detailed information that Claire presented over the evaluation, and there'll be more detailed information on programme delivery. So unless there are any more questions, thank you all very much for your time. I hope it's been useful. And yeah, we look forward to receiving your applications. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.